Hello, welcome back. Today we're talking about Dorian Gray, an Italian movie based off of the short story by Oscar Wilde. The original story was called The Picture of Dorian Gray, and the story is kind of a Faustian tale. Now, the original story was written in 1890. Oscar Wilde, I looked up some info on him. I'd heard that name, I believe I'd heard that name before. This was his only book. Actually, I think, I'm not sure if it was a short story or was a novel, but it was his only book. It was originally published in 1890. Here's a picture. I think it came out, I think this is a magazine. Let's see here. Lippincott's Monthly Magazine. There you go. It's 100 pages long. Okay, so that's kind of like a novella length. Anyway, 1890. There's Oscar Wilde. Quite a picture of him, really. So let's talk about the story. We'll talk a little bit more about Oscar Wilde too. The story is about a guy named Dorian Gray, and his friend paints a portrait of him, and he looks at the portrait, and he loves the way he looks in the portrait, and he loves it so much, and he's such a vain person that he basically says out loud that it bothers him that he has to get old while the portrait will look beautiful forever. And then he says out loud, "I'd sell my soul to have that reverse." So, what happens? He stays young forever, and the portrait ages. Okay? This is actually the 12th adaptation of this story since it was written in 1890. There were multiple versions in the 19 teens, and then many more to follow. I think I looked up there are 23 adaptations altogether, the most recent being in 2009. I don't remember seeing that coming out, but that one was apparently the most popular of all of them. This movie is okay. It's kind of boring, really. I think it's a cool premise, but like not that much happens. Like he basically kind of becomes a bad person. He's really vain, but then maybe because he sold his soul to the devil, he, becomes evil or something. It's not like really obvious. He's like subtly evil. He dates women, and then he kind of like realizes that they're not going to, be beautiful forever. So he doesn't really lock it down with any of them. His first girlfriend he's really in love with, but he's kind of shitty to her. She ends up killing herself. Then like he starts banging like his friends' wives, and then when like one of them sees that he's like kissing another one, but then they like want him so badly that he ends up banging them both at the same time. You don't really see that, but you do see the two women kiss, and then they close the door, which for 1970, I've read that's supposedly, shocking for the time or whatever. I mean, we saw it in The Vampire Lovers. We saw plenty of lesbian scenes. What you do see in this movie that I haven't seen before, although I haven't been digging around for it, was he does have sex with a couple of guys as well. You don't see him have sex, but you do see him kiss. So you see two men kiss, 1970, probably shocking. Other than that, I mean, like nothing really. You can imagine how it plays out. At the end of the movie, he's still young. He looks at the picture. The painting. The painting is grotesque looking, sort of, for a painting. Skin turns green in the painting. And I guess in the book, to spoil the ending, although again, like some of the other recent movies we've been talking about, I don't really think that anyone's going to rush out and see this. But to spoil the ending of both the book and the movie, at the end of the book, I guess he takes a knife and like cuts the painting down, like cuts it apart, rips it up. which then kills him. And in the end of this movie, he like off screen commits suicide. Like you'd think he's gonna cut the painting and then he ends up stabbing himself, but you don't see it. Like you just see his arm go like this, like that. That's pretty much exactly what it looks like. So that's basically it. I think it's interesting that this story was adapted so many times. So I guess it's like a classic. But as far as a horror fan looking at it from 2020, there's not really like that much craziness or anything like that going on. Like he does sell his soul to the devil, which automatically makes it a horror movie. It's certainly not scary, although it does have an interesting score. Interesting because it sounds like the Friday the 13th score. Wait, like 11 years before Friday the 13th came out, or is that 10 years? You know, a decade before Friday the 13th came out, you get the like that kind of thing. So I guess that's kind of interesting. What's more interesting than this movie is Oscar Wilde himself. I looked him up, and he actually was put in prison for being gay in the UK in Atwell. I forget what year, but he wrote this in 1890, and it happened after that. I'm trying to think. He was accused of like sodomy. Someone accused him of it, and then he didn't get arrested, and then he like sued the person for like slandering him. No, for libel. He sued him for libel, and apparently, according to the article I read, his friends were like, "You probably shouldn't do that because then there's going to be an investigation, and they're going to find out like you are a sodomite," and that's what happened. So he got thrown in prison, and then his health went like seriously downhill. Came out, I think he contracted like meningitis and like died on the street. So that's pretty sad for him. I haven't seen any of the other adaptations. I'm not really in a rush to do so after seeing that one. The movie is Italian, but it takes place in London. And so that's kind of, I always like when movies take place in London. But it's kind of weird that it's clearly taking place in London, like with like double-decker buses and shots of Big Ben and stuff like that, but everyone's speaking Italian. So that's kind of strange. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah, no point in dragging this one out, but that's it. Dorian Gray. Oh, one more thing. It had multiple titles. Dorian Gray, The Sins of Dorian Gray, and also The God Called Dorian. These are mostly alternate Italian titles. I think for the most part, like in the US, it was just called Dorian Gray. That's it. All right, I'll see you next time.